Thank you for being here with us. Can you hear me? Please give me a thumbs up if okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Communities Confronting Substance Abuse is a not-for-profit organization founded with the goal of creating stigma-free Jewish communities through awareness, education, and programming on substance misuse and addiction. On October 18th, CCSA hosted an online forum about various topics relating to mental health and addiction. Stemming directly from the success of that event, CCSA has created a unique series called Continuing the Conversation, which involves bringing together groups of people and professionals with different experiences and perspectives to talk about topics that are critical to the Jewish community as a whole. Today, we welcome you to an interactive discussion about alcohol and drinking in the Jewish community, specifically in relation to Purim, Pesach, and other holidays and rituals. We would like to dedicate this event Le'iloi Nishmat Rabbi Dr. Avraham Torsky of blessed memory. Rabbi Torsky was one of the most prominent Jewish leaders of our times and dedicated his career to the field of addiction treatment. His work touched and saved thousands of lives. For us at CCSA, we can truly say that he was an inspiration for the work we do in combating stigma and increasing awareness and education about addiction. He will be greatly missed. Particularly during these difficult and stressful times, we wanted to create an opportunity to have an open discussion about these issues for those who have loved ones who are struggling or who themselves may be facing these challenges. Everything you say today will remain confidential, and we hope you will take advantage of this opportunity. I'd like to introduce our presenters. Arnie Goldfein has been in the Jewish recovery world for over 35 years. He has served as president of JACS, Jewish Alcoholics, Chemically Dependent Person, and Significant Others, and as co-executive director of Rodfei Shalom, Inc. Both organizations are dedicated to the recovery of people with substance use issues. He is currently a New York State Certified Peer Advocate Recovery Specialist, CPRA, helping people to get their lives back on track. Rabbi Hirsch Chin earned his MSW in clinical social work from The Ohio State University. He has recruited and mentored Dr. Abraham Torsky, Zichron Tzadik Livracha, a pioneer in this field. He has been involved with JACS, Jewish Alcoholics, Chemical Dependent Persons, and Significant Others, and the Rooms of Recovery for over 30 years. Rabbi Hirsch currently teaches and counsels in Silver Spring, Maryland, while sharing his life with his wife Chayi, their children and grandchildren. If you ever hear of a recovery kumsitz, please let him know. Chaya got sober in 2002 as a young person. She has taught in an at-risk high school, worked in group homes for teenage girls, and foster care. In recovery, she received her BA and MSED and is working as an educator. In addition to being an active member of a 12-step program, Chaya has also been a member of JACS, Jewish Alcoholics, Chemical Dependents, and Significant Others, and Judah's Place, now known as the Living Room, for the length of her sobriety. Finding where she fits in the recovery world and Judaism has been a big part of her recovery journey. Go Chaya. For the past 40 years, Lou Abrams has been treating those afflicted with addictions and mental health challenges, including adolescents, adults, couples, and families. He has created and directed programs at all levels of care, including traditional outpatient, partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient, and residential services throughout New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. In the early 2000s, as director of Yatz Khan Center, a not-for-profit residential long-term rehabilitation program for Jewish adolescents with substance abuse and emotional behavior problems located in the New York metropolitan area, he increased the quality of treatment and assisted in excess of 200 families from all over the world. Mr. Abrams has a full-time private practice serving individuals, adults and adolescents, couples, and families. Offices are located in New York and New Jersey. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Leanne Foreman and her husband ETL, who are founders of CCSA. Through their own personal experience with their daughter's addiction, they founded the organization to help others facing these issues through a variety of services, including a support group for family members, educational programs, in Jewish day schools, and events like these. Thank you all for being here this morning for this unique opportunity. We encourage all of you to please keep your camera on if possible to keep the discussion open. Our schedule this morning offers each of our presenters an opportunity to share their perspective and personal experiences. We will then open the floor to you for questions. You can choose to either ask your question openly or chat questions to me in the group. Arnie, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Arnie, and I'm an alcoholic. And it's good to meet everybody. I applaud their courage to be here. It's wonderful to see some old friends, and hopefully I'll meet some new friends today. So we're going to start a conversation that's a difficult conversation to understand because, you know, not all of us have a problem, not all of us have an issue, and at the same time understanding what alcoholism is all about for me, and I share only my own experience, was very, very, very difficult. I grew up in a yeshiva world. I grew up where drinking was highly encouraged, or at least that's how I perceived it. Let me put it that way. And especially this time of year, Purim, and then obviously Simchas Torah and Pesach was coming. You know, the more we drank, the bigger the mitzvah. And you know, I had to make sure I got those mitzvahs in there. You know, the best that I could. And you know, Purim was, I think, the only morning out of the year that I got up to go to early minyan just to make sure that I could start drinking earlier. So something was going on, and something was going on inside of me that I really didn't fully comprehend, in the sense that I got sick from it. I wasn't feeling right. My whole perception of self was messed up, and yet, you know, everybody else drank, or at least that's what it looked like to me. So how do we go about taking a look at this and having a conversation and say what's going on over here? It took me personally a very long time. I had to go through the I guess what the word is, through all the roller coaster rides, until I could finally hear that maybe, just maybe, I might have a problem when it came to alcohol. And it wasn't just, you know, as simple as everybody thought that it was. How many people, I think one of the worst things in the world that we can get from the people that we love the most is, if you would just stop drinking, everything would be okay. When it comes to alcoholism, it doesn't quite work like that. Because if I put down alcohol, my life kind of got a little bit worse. And how do I understand that? And how do I deal with that? Most of the people that I live with in the community, in the Jewish community, had no clue whatsoever. Probably some of the biggest drinks that were given to me was Shabbos morning, after shul, when the Rebbe handed out drinks, and you know, the more I learned that week, the bigger the drink was. And this was, you know, this was great for my ego. The Rebbe called me up and I got a drink. So how do I go about dealing with all this stuff? And until really it got to the point that I had burnt my life to the ground and nobody wanted to have anything to do with me, was I able to turn around at a certain point and think, maybe, just maybe, that I had a problem. I had to begin to understand that when it comes to alcoholism, not only did I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol, a guy like me had an abnormal reaction to life, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I'm not saying that everybody who picks up alcohol has a problem. I think that what we need to do is begin to start taking a look at some of this stuff. I'm not going to get into the legal stuff parts of whether, you know, somebody under 21, whether they should drink, the medical science, the people under 26. I'm not going to get into any of that. I can tell you that for me, that what happened, that I had to begin to take a look at, was that when I drank, it created this craving in me that was impossible to let go of. And along with that came the idea, or it was the obsession of mind, that, and that's the one thing that kind of just never leaves, is that I always find a way, and there'll always be a way for me to have that drink that's going to make me feel good, like the first time I had that drink, that made me feel real good, made me feel taller, made me feel better looking, made me feel like everybody else. Because that's what alcohol did. It didn't make me feel better. It didn't make me feel worse. It made me feel like everybody else. And those are the things that I think in a situation like this, where we're beginning to have an open discussion, that we need to begin to bring to the forefront and talk about what's really going on, and what are we doing, and what are we showing our kids, and how are we showing our kids? Because number one, our kids are dying today. Let's leave it simple like that. The other part of what are we showing our kids is if I come home from shul every Shabbos and I pick up a drink because I can't deal with the world today, you know, and I obliterate myself, that what are we really showing our kids, the example that we're setting? So these are some of the things that we need to begin to discuss and understand, that not everybody has a problem with alcohol. Just because somebody has a good time doesn't mean that he's got a problem with it. But somewhere along the way, there's probably, I would say, 10 to 15% of the people that cross over a line that it's impossible for them to come back from. And those are some of the concerns, or most of the concerns that at least I'm here to talk about today. And with that, we turn it over to whoever, Rochelle, you want to turn it over to? You're muted. You're muted, Richard.
Yes, thank you. Now you can hear me? Okay, great. Okay, Rabbi Chin.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Good morning, family. My name is Hirsch, a grateful member of the Rooms of Recovery. Thank you, Arnie. It's always a pleasure to see you, to be with you. Well, it's not always a pleasure, Arnie, but love you. Arnie, we go back for a very long time. I'd like to share a few thoughts, especially about recovery. But I want to take a step back. In February 2011, in Tenafly, New Jersey, Jack's hosted a dinner the evening of Twersky, something like that, was mainly in honor of Dr. Twersky's 80th birthday. And at his 80th birthday, I had the responsibility and pleasure of roasting him, of being presented for him. And I mentioned then, and this February 2011, how that night we were all Twerskys. And, you know, the maitre d', you know, Chris was Chris Twersky, and I was Hirsch Twersky, and Arnie Twersky, and whoever, we were all Twerskys that night, because we had all benefited. We were all celebrating what was, you know, what had the gift that we had been given, with a different type of feeling. In February 2021, we were all Twerskys, and we were all getting up from Shiva. We're getting up from mourning, from grieving, and together we share this idea that if I may paraphrase, that if whoever saves a life, they've saved an entire world. Whoever educates, teaches a child as if they have given birth to them. How many worlds have been saved by Dr. Twersky? How many of us were given life by Dr. Twersky? And so that as we get up from Shiva collectively, as we as a community, we as a family share the grief, we say the traditional statement of mourning, of consolation, actually, of nechama, is hamako minachem eschem mesoch shari aviltzin Yerushalayim. May God give us comfort together amongst all those who mourn for Zion and for Yerushalayim. And we use the phrase hamakom, the omnipresent. And I think it's interesting, but this morning I think it's even more important. Omnipresent, God is hamakom, the place. And there was a story that took place between the one conversation between the Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Satmar Rebbe, when they asked each other this question: why do we say hamakom? And the answer was because when a person leaves this world, there's a void, there's a space, and since each of us are unique, no one can fill that space. I can't take the space that you leave behind. I can't replace you. You can't replace me. Oh, so if someone leaves this world, the only one who can replace that is the Hakadosh Baruch Hu, who is Hamakom. He can take that place. And this place, this void that has been left in the soul of the recovery world is a difficult void. But God, the God of our understanding, the God who we don't understand, the God of our spiritual recovery, is able to fill that. So Hamakom, may God fill that space, and the divinity and godliness that's in each of us, if we put it together. So I can't fill the space, you can't fill the space, but we collectively, perhaps we collectively can fill that void in the soul of the addict. That emptiness, that pain, we collectively can feel. Hamakom, that place. I can't, you can't, but perhaps we can. And that's reflected, that same idea, when we stood at Har Sinai, we stood at Mount Sinai, we read about it yesterday, and we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, God, let us, we will hear, we will do, we will hear. Again, the collective. I can't, you can't. I can't do it alone, you can't do it alone, but we can do, we can observe, we can listen, and we can reach stages of recovery. I wanted to share a teaching by Dr. Tversky, he spoke about spirituality, a program of spirituality, not of religion, but of spirituality. And he gave certain markers of what spirituality is. He said the idea, one of the things that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom, because in so many ways we are a member of the animal kingdom. He said one of the points is that we learn from the past, well, not just my own past, but generations. What happened to my grandparents, great grandparents? Okay, the champion stallion, the champion of racehorse doesn't think about that the man of war, that great, what did he do wrong? What can I learn from him? Animals don't work that way. And the idea, second point of golden purposes, we can contemplate, we can think, how am I going to get there? Wherever there is, what's the plan of action? 3, we can voluntarily, I can choose to say, I need to work on something. I need to prove voluntarily, not because of an electric shock, not because of food, not because of something right there at the moment, but I need to improve myself. How am I going to do it? That's part of who we are spiritually. Number 4, delayed gratification. I can put something aside. I'll get to it. I don't need it right now. Something we all struggle with, because that drive is certainly, well, I'll speak for myself. That drive is certainly very, very strong. Number 5, thinking about long-term consequences, not just immediate, not the immediate, the fenceless fence, whatever it's called, where the animal gets a shock, but long time. What's it going to lead to? Number 6, controlling anger, something that all of us struggle with. And number 7, finally, the capacity to forgive. These, Dr. Tversky suggests, are stages of spirituality. As a human animal, as a human being, as Homo sapien, these are things that I have to think about as a human being, how I'm going to increase the humanity, the spirituality of who I am. And then, of course, is the challenge as Jews. How do we incorporate Judaism into spirituality? How do we bring those together? Many of us, it's been ripped apart. Judaism was what I did, divorced of thought from emotion, from feeling. And then through recovery, I've been introduced to a world of spirituality. Are they separate? Or can we, and how can we bring them together? And I'd like to, and finally, to end with in the idea of spirituality, of bring it to the idea of holidays. Of Purim is one, but the ideas of holidays. How do we redefine? How do we redirect? Is Purim just drinking? Is Purim a time of, as Esther told Mordechai, of getting together, of checking in with each other? How do I give to someone else? Is Purim a time of delayed gratification, of looking long term? How am I going to be at the right place so I can be of service? And now, just closing the famous saying that many of us drank to, Chayav inish levasume. Oh, you got to drink on Purim. That's not what it says. It says a person should be intoxicated with Purim, not with wine. What lesson do we teach our children? They're the holidays. That there are holidays. It's not just about matzah. It's about freedom. It's not about drinking. Okay? It's about connecting. We're seeing God in what's hidden. We need to redefine, redirect. These are some of the issues we'd like to talk about. I'd like to speak about today. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here to share your recovery and your Jewish spirituality. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was amazing. Wow. Okay, so we are going to move on to Chaya. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chaya. This is my first time speaking on a public forum, so that's a little nerve-wracking for me, open to the public. But I hope that it's helpful to someone. So I'm happy to share my experience and talk more about this. It's an important topic for me, and I really want to destigmatize this because, yeah. All right. Well, I started drinking very young. There was always alcohol in my house. Um, you know, every Friday night, Shabbos day, I was the little kid that would beg for some more wine by Kiddush. And while everyone was going to wash their hands, I was, opening the bottle and pouring as much as I could right down my throat as fast as I could, and listening for anyone walking back in to the kitchen. I'm sorry, into the dining room, and then pretend I washed my hands, or I'd quickly go run, wash my hands, and act as if I didn't drink half the bottle, and then proceed to spend the rest of the meal trying to get more wine. So that really, that's exactly how I drank from very early on. Was always about getting more and getting as much as into my body as fast as possible. I would do this thing where I would pretend that I didn't drink, or only had a little, because if I acted drunk or it showed, I would be cut off. So that was really important to me, was not letting anyone know. I was the kid who went into the freezer and helped myself to vodka. I claimed it was to help me sleep, and put water in the bottle, not understanding condensation. I was the kid who, by Purim, I was the one that was so happy to help with all the shalfmanis, because I would take the bottles of vodka, the little ones, and wine, or whatever I could get my hands on, and store that in my room so that I can have it at nighttime when I'd come home from a hard day of school at 11 years old. That was me. That's how I drank. It was as much as I could, as often as I could, whenever I could. And Jewish holidays were my favorite, because that's where it was okay, it was acceptable. I couldn't let anyone know my secret. And I'm not going to get into my whole story, but that's essentially the way I drank. And I went to places like Chaim Berlin, where it was, outside for those on Simchas Torah, and got as drunk as I could with everyone else. And I would drink before, and I drink during, and I drink after, and bad things would happen, ending up in a car with a drunk driver, with my hand getting smashed in the door, but so drunk that I didn't know what was going on. And they noticed the door didn't close, and my fingers were sticking out the other side. And going to the ER, and just all those things, the consequences that come along with it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just thought that I became the person that God always intended me to be when I was drunk. I was smart, I was happy, I was pretty. I thought that was who I was supposed to be. And fast forward a lot, but I didn't understand alcoholism. I didn't have a community around me to explain it. I just thought there's something wrong with me. And this made things better. I didn't have anyone to talk to. There weren't programs back then, really. And thank God for an outpatient program when I was 15, that really planted some seeds, but I didn't yet get sober until I was older. I did things like trying to stop on my own accord, which looked like me running away to live in Israel. I lived in Sfat on a mountaintop, thinking, if I'm far away from all my friends, I'll be okay, right? That's not how it works. You just switch addictions. But I thought I had it as long as I don't drink alcohol. I remember I was actively trying not to, and I had a dorm mate who, on Purim time, I was like, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to drink. And she went and got me seltzer and grape juice so that I can make sparkling grape juice, because she knew that my parents did that for me. That was, my parents were really very supportive. And one of the things they did was they tried to make staying sober fun. So things like, giving me sparkling grape juice, or, when everyone else was drinking wine. And they just really tried to be supportive, but really it just was hard. And my parents did things like not having alcohol on the table when I was around, to try and not surround me by temptation. But living in the world and leaving the house, you're surrounded by temptation. And I had a lot, some amazing friends, thank God, but I didn't stay sober. That was really hard. I felt like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just stay stopped? Even with all these loving people in my life. And, I thank God for a 12-step program. Thank God for Jack's. Thank God for Judah's Place. and a living room. Like these were all great resources that helped show me that I could stay sober. And a big part, I remember my first year sober, it was right before Pesach time. And I was really nervous because for me, Pesach was a big trigger time. Like I would be the kid who at the table would say, it's the 4 cups of wine and you have to have wine, of course, and I'd have my first glass and then I'd have my second glass. And then I'd say, I don't think I had my first glass. I need to start all over again. And so I'd have my first glass again, then my second glass. And I convinced my parents that, no, that I just had my first. Now I need to have my second. And I just kept drinking and drinking, and once they're also drinking, it's easy to just sneak off with a bottle somewhere. And that's how I rolled. And so Pesach was always a stressful time for me. The Chagim, it was, I have so much memories surrounding drinking. How was I going to stay sober during Pesach? And I remember speaking to Rabbi Torsky right before, and he told me that I need to do whatever it is to stay sober, that it's pikuach nefesh, and whether it meant going to a meeting, picking up the phone and calling someone on Pesach. And I said, at what point do I do that? Like at the point where I have my hands around the bottle? Because at that point, there's no stopping me, and we had a really great talk about it. And that was 18 years ago. And, I'm really grateful for that because it really told me that it's more important that I stay sober than anything else. Like more important than, because sometimes oh, but it's Shabbos, I can't. Like how many times did I drink or do other stuff on Shabbos? I need to put whatever I could because there is no keeping Shabbos if I'm not sober. There's no connection with Hashem. It's just me and getting more. And, and that was really helpful. And, I'm really grateful today because I have friends in my life who drink and I have friends, but they're super supportive and I don't put myself in situations that are risky. I have a fantastic sober support and, there's a lot that I have in place. And one of my, I'm so grateful for my parents because they've always been one, have made my home, my home, a safe place for me to come back to always, no matter what was happening. I can call them 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, I really want to drink. And they're like, where are you? And come get me. Or I'm in a bad situation, or whatever it is. They've always been incredibly supportive without judgment. And I think that's been, when I look back at these 18 years sober, I'm so grateful because it wasn't just my parents, it was my siblings. And I knew that I can call them at any point because my parents set really good examples. There was no judgment in my house about what's wrong with her. Why can't she just stop? I mean, there was like, hey, I was the kid who also filmed every family event, and now they tell me that they're proud of me, which is, beyond amazing. I'm sorry, I haven't been watching the time, but I feel like, Michelle, how much time do I have left?
You go, girl.
And I know that this stuff is really hard and it's really tricky. If you're wondering, like, do I have a problem? There are people here who care and that understand it and are happy to talk about it. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. I kept thinking like people could stop. I remember Purim, I was 17 years old. I was in Israel and I remember asking, I was somewhere where there was a lot of drinking and I was really trying not to because that was part of my, if I only get religion, then I won't drink, right? I just have to be really, really, really religious and it's not how it works. And I was like holding on for dear life and I felt like, I was literally like sitting on my hands, craving, like drooling, just wanting to drink. And I asked them, like, how do people not drink? And she's like, and she just thought I was crazy. Like, what do you mean? And for me, it's like, I just didn't understand it. Like, I just wanted so badly to drink. And the miracle for me today is that I have zero craving at all to drink. It doesn't come up for me. I can go somewhere, there could be people drinking. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. As a principal, I do not sit at a bar. I might go to a bar for a birthday party, let's say. As long as I have a reason to be there, I'll never sit at the bar stool. But I have my own, and I'll never ever walk in if I don't feel like I'm spiritually fit. I'm in a place that I'm okay. But the big question, like, I could never have done this sooner, like in my earlier sobriety. I remember I thought that my life would be, I thought my life was over. I thought, what would getting sober look like? Boring, and I wouldn't have fun anymore. I've had the most incredible experiences in sobriety. I can travel anywhere. I can, well, not now, but I can do anything. I can go beyond, and I'm so not limited. My life is so colorful and big, and you know, and the ability to handle stuff as it comes up. Like I didn't think that I'd go through, I didn't understand how I can handle life on life's terms. And today, like, it's the ability to handle this stuff, being able to like walk into a Jewish holiday and like have an amazing, joyful time, regardless what's happening, without the need to drink or do something else in order to escape it. And it's about owning Judaism for me and how I connect to it. And I have a whole different relationship with it than that perspective that I grew up with. So that's it. Thanks.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Kaya, from the heart. Thank you. Lou, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's such an honor to be with this crew of people. You have some real knowledgeable, loving people that are speaking today, and the people that are attracted to this. What's unfortunate and so ironic sometimes is that people that come to a talk like this and participate don't necessarily need to be here. It's the people that are not here, I find, that often need to be here. But with that said, I think it's tremendously important, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rabbi Twersky, who was a personal mentor to me for a long time, including the Yatskin Center, and his knowledge, but more than anything, his sweetness and his ability to draw people in, and his humanness was so impacting. I can't tell you. People have said it before, and I think people will say it forever. Very special person. I wanted to talk a little bit about Purim and about holidays, and tell you that one of the striking parts of my work with the Yatskin Center back in the early 2000s was interviewing teenagers when they came in. It was a residential 10-month program with school and therapy nonstop, very concentrated program. And so part of the admission process was talking with kids that were coming in and had problems with drugs and alcohol and mental health. And to a T, I don't remember a teen that came in and didn't mention, when we asked them, when did you first start drinking? To a T, the teenagers spoke about Jewish festivals, Shabbos, Shalom Zachars, brisses, regular Shabbos weekly, as being the areas, the environments where they actually were introduced to alcohol. And that is something that is just a phenomenon in our culture, in our subculture, you know, in all cross sections of Jewish life. And the bottom line is that I also learned it doesn't work to scare people, particularly teenagers. Fear is a very short-term deterrent. And it's a very difficult deterrent to really help kids get into healthy habits. They get into habits based on what they see and what they learn and what we teach them. And I think the bottom line is that parents are in a very powerful, and I don't want to put too much pressure on parents, but I have to tell you, parents and rebbeim and teachers and all the different role models that a teenager comes in contact with, they don't give you a manual. I know I didn't get one when I became a parent, in terms of, you know, how do I show my child the best way? What do we do to role model? And teens, by and large, are really interested in what they see. What we tell them is less important than what they see as our role modeling. And they're also very interested, I've learned, in what we don't say. So if you don't talk about this, it really is a statement. And we can do some incredible work from the very beginning of a child's life, age appropriately. When a kid is growing up, we have big decisions to make. One of the decisions that is paramount is when children become 11, 12, 13 years old, even younger than that. Some parents will say, you know what, we're not going to have alcohol any longer. We're not going to have wine for Kiddush. We're going to have grape juice, which is halachically as sound as can be. There is absolutely no problem with it. When that kid becomes a teenager, they also might say, you know what, I want to see my kid watch me drink responsibly. And that's going to be a message I'm going to give. So those two paths are often sought after and decided by parents. And my feeling is it's not as important which one of those choices, and there are other choices as well, but just to make it very simple, which path the family takes and the parents take, it's whether it gets talked about. It's whether it gets processed. And it's a difficult topic for a lot of people because parents have no experience, have no role modeling in terms of how to talk about this. Kids learn on Purim what's appropriate and what's not. They learn what the norms are and what the norms are not. And they learn by watching. They learn by watching. They learn by talking with each other. And if they're fortunate, they start to see healthy behavior from parents in terms of how they drink. And let me just mention, and it shouldn't be mentioned incidentally, it's very, very important, but there may be some people on this call that are in recovery. It's very important for people in recovery to understand and to follow paths of recovery during holidays and during any event, any occasion, any experience where they may be privy to alcohol. They may be involved in an environment where alcohol is being served, and particularly on Purim and holidays like Simchas Torah. Recovering people that are really working a program certainly need to keep in mind what's safe. They learn, if they go to 12-step meetings, for sure, they learn about people, places, and things, and they make decisions that put their recovery before anything else. It's pikuach nefesh. It's about life and death for recovering people. That may sound dramatic, but I don't think it can be overstated. Parents, when they learn the facts, are in a much better place, a much more realistic place, a much more practical and effective place to affect their children. When they learn the facts, when they talk to other parents that are in the know, that understand and have also learned, when they are able to say no to certain decisions that need to be made, even if their kid tells them you're the toughest, strictest parents in the world, which is generally not the case. There are other parents that are making those decisions. When they role model their own use of alcohol in an appropriate way, and more than anything, when they elicit and they engage kids in discussion. And there are negotiable pieces and there are non-negotiable pieces, but in our culture and the various subcultures of Yiddishkeit, there are subcultures where the norm is to get drunk on Purim, and that's not okay. It's certainly not okay for children to see, and it's not okay as this role modeling situation goes. They need to learn by watching and by seeing responsible drinking. They need to learn, especially Purim, which is a holiday where you can actually drive. It's not a halachically non-driving holiday, different from Simchas Torah, and different than Shabbos. So the stakes are even higher. We have had countless crises in the Jewish community on Purim because it's, for some teenagers, it's a rite of passage, and it's the first time they're going to drink, and they don't understand the power of alcohol. And so we've had kids end up in emergency rooms. We've had alcohol poisoning. We've had actual overdoses on alcohol. And when you've been involved in that kind of crisis, it leaves an impacting lesson. I also wanted to talk about responsible concern. I wanted to talk about a theme that we stressed at the Yatskin Center and that really has been stressed in every rehab, whether it be outpatient, inpatient, or whatever the level of care is. Responsible concern, which transcends peers, it transcends different environments, has to do with what responsibility a peer or a parent or a friend has when they watch somebody do something that's dangerous. Judaism has a real mitzvah right in Vayikra. You should not stand idly by your friend's blood. If a person's in danger, we need to try and save them, even from themselves. We need to do something when we see something happening that's not okay. Jews are interconnected with people, not just Jewish people, but people in general in the world, and have a responsibility to say something, as difficult as it might be. And the best way to do this, in terms of the family context, in terms of yeshivas or public schools, wherever a child grows up educationally, is to do preparatory, preventive kind of work. You can't start, although people do, and it's better than nothing. It's really not nearly as effective to start talking about Purim 5 minutes before Purim starts. It needs to be inculcated in the family tradition, in the family, the hashkafa of the family, the philosophy of the family, that we prepare for this. We don't do a knee-jerk reaction, but we inculcate and just integrate this topic into the discussion in parenting and in dialogue between parents and children. And there's age-appropriate ways to do this. This is different for a 7-year-old than it is for a 10-year-old, and different for a 10-year-old than a 13-year-old, and on and on and on. And with the message that it needs to happen as soon as possible, it's never too late to happen either. It's something that is huge. I think that the difference between somebody that abuses alcohol and is really headed to be a social drinker, and somebody who abuses alcohol and it's the beginning of a pattern of problems, is very, very important to understand. Because a social drinker will drink and they may have an abuse event, but they will change their drinking and they won't drink that way again. If we have experiences with children, with our teenagers, with young adults, whoever it is, and they have had problems on Purim in years past, it's a very important part of the equation. They're not just beginning to have problems with alcohol on Purim. They have a history of having problems on Purim and other holidays and other Jewish events. And obviously, non-Jewish events are another time where individuals can have problems. But the key word is problems. The key word is consequences. People that drink socially do not have consequences in any kind of significant consequential way. They don't lose things. They don't have problems because of their drinking. They may have other problems, but they're not because of their ingestion of alcohol. And it's difficult because in this culture that we live in many, many areas, there is an expectation that on Purim you drink. And so we're giving children the opportunity, if we don't really prepare and we don't teach them, we're giving the opportunity to do experimentation, and by trial and error, they'll drink and see what happens. And sometimes they'll feel really good physically and emotionally, and they open up when they drink. And sometimes that can be a very, very reinforcing factor, and things can happen. So we need to process Purim after Purim, just like we prepare for Purim. Very, very crucial. I think I'll stop now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, everybody. I can't tell you the messages that are coming into me in the chat, how everybody is touched and really enjoying the program. Thank you very much. Okay, I am going to start the questions. I see there are some hands raised and I have some questions. So I'm going to go back and forth between the questions that came in. I'm going to try to pretty much go in order, but don't worry, I will get to you. I see a few people have their hands up. Okay, so the first question. Okay, somebody's asking actually for some contact information. I am in Philadelphia. Can I get the name of the person in Pennsylvania? I have spoken to my rabbi and I'm working on bringing Jax to Philadelphia, or at least a panel on addiction on recovery in the community. We are in the early stages. Is there anybody of our speakers who can speak to that?
Well, Rochelle, this is ETL. I mean, we'd be happy to work with the community to bring a panel to Philadelphia. Actually, we at CCSA were in, one of the high schools in Philadelphia, presenting to all the students and presented to a number of the parents as well there just several weeks ago. So I'd be happy to work with you, with whomever, to try and bring a panel and more education to that community. Just reach out to us offline. Rochelle will send you our contact information. We're happy to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm going to put into the chat in a minute our webpage, timetotalkaddiction.org, and the email addresses for all of our presenters. So if you want to follow up afterwards with any of us, you will have that information put in the chat in a few minutes. Okay, thank you very much, ETL. All right, our next question. Oh, somebody wants to learn more about CCSA. That's great. Okay, all right. Is it okay to modify, I apologize if I am reading the question a little bit wrong. Is it okay to modify the measurements, I think it's supposed to be, of wine during rituals? I have 16 days sober. Yay. Wine is my drug of choice. I am overwhelmed by all the changes I need to make to keep my sobriety. We switched to Kedem 2 Shabbats ago. Last night doing Havdalah with my children, I felt conflicted, saying the verse, wine gladdens the heart, because for me and my family, wine has brought us a lot of pain. Saying that brings it all back. Will this get better over time? Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, who would like to take that?
Okay.
Everybody raises their hand.
You're all good. One of you go with it.
So my experience, I'll just jump in real quick with this. If there's a problem with alcohol, then there's a problem with alcohol. I don't know, I'm not quite sure I understand the questioner's, what she's really asking. Are you asking, do you drink less?
Yeah, I think what she's asking is, it says, the pasuk says, wine gladdens the heart. So not using wine, using grape juice or using other measurements, is that a problem? I believe what she's asking.
I misheard the
Halachically,
question.
yeah.
Go ahead, let somebody else pick it up then.
So I would just say that wine gladdens the heart, but if you go back to Bereshis, and if we could figuratively ask Noach if wine gladdened his heart,
How'd that
it
work out
was,
for you?
it
But
was
also the mentioning of the word wine. Thank you for getting back to me. The mentioning of the word wine, is that a problem that she's not using wine?
So can I answer that? I think of it as like, if I were allergic to strawberries, I'm allergic to strawberries. I'm not going to try to eat strawberries, right? But there's nothing wrong with strawberries for someone else. So I don't see anything wrong with wine gladdening the heart for someone else. It's not going to gladden my heart because I'm just going to crave more and I'm going to turn into a hot mess. It's going to be a big problem for everyone around me, but that's okay. It gladdens hearts, just not mine. That's how I look at it.
And to add to that, Noah, with all due respect, the first thing he did when he came out of the ark was he built a vineyard and he got drunk. I don't think that part was the problem. The second part of that we're not talking about too much, is he ended up naked in front of the kids. It sounds like some level of dysfunction that's going on over there. And to me, that's the alcoholism. And then he blamed the kids too. That's alcoholism.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. No, I don't want to. So first of all, that the Yain Samach Levadim, that verse that wine gladdens. First of all, wine is a generic word, not necessarily alcohol. Grape juice is also considered wine in that respect. It doesn't gladden, but it's also not part of the ritual. It's a statement in Psalms it does. For as Chaya said, in general, wine may gladden. If it doesn't work for me, it's not part. There's no mitzvah of saying that. It's not part of Kiddush. But no matter what you're using, it's not part of the Kiddush service. It's the psalmist, David HaMelech, uses that as a description of wine in general. Does this for people? I don't see any reason if it doesn't work for you, don't say it. If it doesn't work for you, there's no chiyuv, no obligation to be said. We have to protect our lives. In the list of pikuach nefesh, of things that threaten our lives, saying that verse is not. It doesn't make the list. Please understand that the overarching idea of b'chai b'hem, Judaism must give us life. We live by Judaism, with Judaism. It's not in conflict. And thank you.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Arnie and obviously Rabbi Chin. It's just not a coincidence that we get an experience in the second parsha of the Torah about alcohol. And let's make no mistakes, wine is a type of alcohol. And when we're talking about alcohol, whether it be beer or wine or quote unquote, listen to the name, we give hard liquor. So it can be so misconceived to be different than wine or beer. we're talking about ethyl alcohol, the ingredient that changes somebody's mood and often their personality. And for some people, it changes the experience and it changes their lives. And I like what Chaya said. It's an allergy. It's been talked about as an allergy in Alcoholics Anonymous for the inception of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so what is Hashem telling us by introducing a man who's at least has abuse with alcohol, and who Noach did great things for the Jewish people until the end. And in the end, he drank and he defiled himself, as Arnie mentioned, and then you don't hear about him at all anymore. There's a major, major message there for us. That's a consequence. That's a big consequence.
There's also, I like to say, I'm Michelle, hi. There's also this feeling of parents being afraid of their children or afraid to set a boundary. It's okay to say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. I'm sorry you're uncomfortable. And just to proceed very gently, but taking small steps to say, this is how we are in our family now. This is what we're going to do. And we'll reevaluate it in a month. But not to be like bullied by your own kids. Just this is what's comfortable for the family, and we'll discuss it again in a month.
Okay.
If I can respond to that.
Yes, Chaya, go ahead.
When my parents tried to impose rules on me as a teenager, I essentially stuck my fingers in my ears and was like, if you're going to give me rules, you're never going to see me again. I'm going to disappear. And so my parents' rule then became call home every night and let us know where you're staying and how you're doing. But there was no, at the point, because I was so far in my addiction, there was no way of getting to me. And I think at that point, and so what they did was they gave me a rule that I was capable of following, which was to call them every night so they knew if I was alive or dead. But the truth is that probably would have been a fantastic, if they would have known about alcoholism a lot sooner, and that would have changed the way the drinking was in the house. You know, I might have grown up a little bit before I was exposed to alcohol and then could have made decisions, and then things could have looked a little different. I'm not blaming my parents at all. They didn't have that understanding. But I think probably the intervention much sooner, or even just the awareness, this is why this conversation is so important, is that from very young ages, children don't need to be exposed to alcohol. You can wait until they're older. It could be grape juice on the table. There's nothing wrong with having grape juice on the table. A lot of times people say, you know, oh, but it's Purim, you have to drink, and there's all this pressure. No, you know, like, that's totally fine to have grape juice, and children don't need to be exposed to it. That's not a rule that children should get drunk. And so I think part of the permissiveness sometimes that happens at such a young age, this is why this conversation is so important, because it's harder to implement when they're already teenagers, from my personal experience.
Rochelle, if it's okay, I just want to jump in. There are a couple of questions, a number of questions that came in around rabbis and communities either encouraging or turning a blind eye towards drinking that's happening in shuls, kiddush clubs, etc., as well as the influence of yeshivos and the influence towards, or the bias towards drinking, and somehow the conflict between that and perhaps the message that parents are trying to drive in the home. So I think that's a very important topic that really encapsulates a number of the questions. I would start off from the communal perspective, and then I'm really interested in what our panelists have to say. But my view is that dealing with those issues is a responsibility that falls on all of us. Our rabbis and our yeshivos are communal leaders. We are parts of communities. Be vocal. Talk to your rabbi about it. If you have a boy in yeshiva and there's drinking going on, talk to them. You know, it's important, obviously, to point these things out in forums like this. But I will tell you, you know, we are in regular contact with many rabbanim, making sure that they understand what's going on in their communities to make it clear that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. But my challenge to everyone on this Zoom today is you can make a difference. This is something that if you talk to your rabbi, talk to the yeshivos where your children are, make sure they understand that there's another side to this issue, that's going to be a huge step forward. But I'd really be interested in hearing our panelists' views on those issues as well.
Hey guys, I'd like to jump in on this. Yeah, I've been involved with Jax since 1985. And this is something that we've tried to get across to the community for years. It's a really, really difficult subject. I mean, my first drink, conscious drink, was in shul when I was 11 years old. And some guy calls me over, he says, "Kimanan du nehmt a Stück Hering mit der Gläsel Schnaps." This is at 11 years old. Now, the herring was bad enough. I hate to tell you, at 11 years old, remember the jarred herring? But then came the schnapps afterwards. And I have to tell you, for me, and Lou touched on this a little bit, something happened to me that's different than happens to probably, most of the people. The smell was bad. The taste was horrible. In a millionth of a second, I loved the way it made me feel. But then I had another one, that last thing, I wanted more. And that part of wanting more was the difference between me and the bulk of the other people. Being able to go to rabbis, this is almost like the bingo thing, the bingo thing that goes on. Let's have hi. Are you saying hi, Hirsch? What are you saying? The bingo thing where they had bingo in shuls for many years. What are we really, showing our kids? What are we showing our families as to what's going on? And my first drunk was in yeshiva. On a Purim Suda, my Rebbe, he says, "Here, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink," until they carried me out of the room. And I went back banging on his door saying, "If you don't give me more, I'm going to jump out the window." He said, "Go ahead, you live on the first floor." He didn't care. But this was the kind of stuff that we got to begin to get going, the conversation to get going, to understand that there's something going on here. And again, Lou touched on something that was very important before. Not everybody who picks up a drink has a problem. Okay, maybe somewhere along there's going to have, some kind of a significant event's going to happen in their lives, and the doctor might say to them, "Okay, your liver is expanded, or you're losing your job," and the wife is going to say, "Okay, if you don't stop drinking," and the guy is going to turn around and say, "Okay, I'm going to stop drinking." But we got to begin to focus on what's going on here, to take a look at what's going on, because again, people are dying. I heard a symposium from these doctors a few years ago when the opioid epidemic was as high as it was. And I don't know how many doctors there were in the room. And one of the guys says, "Look, the medical world has created a painkiller that helps 80% of the population. So are you telling me that we shouldn't do it because the other 20% has a problem?" And the answer is no. But you have to begin to educate that there is no thermometer for addiction. And we got to begin to start to see what's going on. And we need to have, especially the rabbis, have a part of this to understand that stuff is going on that's destroying us.
I'm
Can I
new,
jump
and
in,
I'd like
please?
to be part of the discussion, if possible. Hi.
Go
sorry.
ahead, Annette. I was going to call on you.
Thank you. You're talking about having a discussion about this, and I've never been here before. So I'm the person that's come in to have this discussion. And so this might sound crazy, but I grew up in a house where if my parents gave me a little bit of alcohol during Passover, it's because they didn't think I was going to turn into an alcoholic. It wasn't for any other reason. Nobody can protect, at least this is my opinion, you can't protect and control the amount of alcohol that's in your environment. If you're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. I found alcohol. There was no drinking in my house whatsoever, but I found it, and I became an alcoholic and an addict. And when I went into recovery and I told my family, and they said, "How often do you go to meetings?" And I said 7 days a week. It was as if that was a barometer. Like if I would have gone to 3 instead of 7, I might not have been as bad. So you need all 7, you don't just need 3. So to me, the truth of the matter is that I grew up in a Jewish environment, maybe not as religious as everyone here, but still, I grew up in a Jewish environment where nobody thought that giving a little bit of alcohol to somebody was going to turn them into an alcoholic. And I, as an alcoholic, I drank with my friends. I didn't drink in my family. I didn't drink on the holidays or anything, because that was of no use to me, having a little sip of wine. I needed to go out there and I needed to have the good stuff and the big stuff, because I needed to just, I could be in a house and I was uncomfortable in my own skin, and there could be no drinking whatsoever. And I couldn't wait to leave to have that first drink to get comfortable in my own skin. And my parents had no idea. So to me, the message is important that alcoholism exists in the Jewish community, period. There's no controlling it. There's no hiding it. At least that's my opinion. I'm sorry.
If I could jump in, please.
Go ahead.
Can I?
Yes, Rabbi, go ahead.
Thank you. Just one of the things over the many years in Jack's that we try to do, we're always inviting rabbis to come to the retreat, and it wasn't because necessarily, usually when not the rabbi didn't necessarily have an issue with alcohol, but rabbis don't know. The world out there doesn't know, and if we don't tell them, they're not going to know. And I would say rabbis, educators are trained problem solvers. We try to solve things, which is why I believe all rabbis have to go to Al-Anon. But that's a separate problem. But most of the time, the educators are trying to do what's right. They're trying to do good. They're trying to engage the kids. We'll do it, whatever it takes. And unless someone explains to them, and not just once or twice, if we don't go into the school, we don't sit down with the rabbis, rabbi to rabbi, or addict to rabbi, explain what goes on. We can't expect the rabbis to know intuitively. And it's just like parents will tell us don't drink, it doesn't mean anything. If we don't really connect with and demonstrate the dangers, and be able to cite cases and heart to heart connect with rabbis and educate, they won't know. You need to be there. You need to be vulnerable in a safe way. But we need to educate the rabbis and the educators. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm also new. I have my hand up. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. I have 34 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, going on my 35th. Okay, the principles of AA, okay, actually outline how to go about, right, communicating someone who may suffer from the disease of alcoholism or have the potential. It takes one alcoholic talking to another. So it's the alcoholic who shares their story, okay? Remember, doctors, rabbis, politicians, they cannot cure, okay, what drinking for an alcoholic does. It's one alcoholic talking to another. And it's when people, right, just like in this forum, right, we're sharing, like Kaya is sharing her story, maybe it's up to us, right, to be able to come into, right, the Jewish congregation or at Jewish religious schools and come and share our stories. All right. And, you know, again, no one shared their stories with me. And I also, right, had my first drinks at Shabbos and also the bar and bat mitzvahs. All right. Oh my God, I had them every weekend. Every weekend I drank at the age of 13. All right. I suffered from the allergy of alcohol and the obsession of the mind. The only way for me to have recovered is that I came to believe in a power greater than myself, which is Hashem.
So Sharon, thank you so much for the comments. I will tell you, I think your point about education is critical. Just so everyone understands, one of the things that we do is at CCSA is we go into middle schools and high schools. We don't start in high school. We go and talk to, 7th and 8th graders as well. And the approach that we take is to educate them about alcohol. We don't go in there and tell them alcohol and drugs are bad, because if you do that, they tell you you're lying, because they try them and they feel great to these kids. So we educate them about what alcohol and drugs are. We educate them on consequences. We educate them around good decision-making and things of that nature. We are working to change the way that this community addresses our youth around these issues.
Are you an alcoholic sharing your story?
I am not, but the people who deliver our presentations are in recovery, every one of them.
Okay.
Okay. I really appreciate everyone's commentary. The interest of time and trying to get to all the questions, we're happy to take questions and then ask our panelists to answer them. But let's try and keep it to that so we can get as many of the questions answered as possible. Rochelle, who's next?
Oh, I thought you were going to pick one. Okay. Uchai, did you have something you wanted to say? Go for it.
I wanted to say that one of the things that would happen, I've lost a few friends to alcoholism in the religious community and drug addiction. And what would happen is that there would be a big celebration honoring their life with tons of alcohol. And it would just be a drunk fest.
Oh God.
And so one of the things that needed to happen and needs to happen is this awareness and understanding. And going into middle schools, these are important, and going into yeshivas and going and talking to rabbis, but it really takes every single person to stand up to the rabbi and say, hey, maybe we could have some wine, maybe we can limit it not to the children, maybe we could, and it comes from the congregants themselves demanding changes to happen. So that's every single person on here going back to their rabbis and asking for alcohol training, into someone to come into the shuls and speak, if the rabbi doesn't have an awareness, we as the congregants can be the ones to advocate and request this, and it has to start from us.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next question. If you have a friend that you really think may have a problem, but the person is closed off to the discussion and won't hear you, is there anything you can still do to help that person?
Can I take that?
Please.
Can I start on it? It's a very excellent question. And I think that this is where responsible concern becomes so crucial. And responsible concern is different than snitching and diming and ratting and narking. And I could go on with the synonyms for that behavior, because responsible concern is very, very much about showing love and taking a risk. And it may not happen for adolescents in particular. It may not happen most effectively by going to the person that is the person you're concerned about. Sometimes kids need permission to go to somebody else, and they need to feel like I'm not narking on this friend of mine. I'm not being a goody two shoes. I'm genuinely concerned. And where do they get that understanding from? They get it from being exposed to talk about this in a healthy way. They get it from teachers, from parents, from a myriad of people who are not afraid to develop talk about this and engage kids in talking about this. And it's still very risky, but risky in a healthy way. We don't know who's an alcoholic and who's not most of the time when they're taking their first drink. Sometimes we do retrospectively, and we're all geniuses after the fact, including myself. We all know when somebody has been in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. We know that there's a problem. With teenagers, we don't know. And we also don't know with adults. There are adults that turn 50 and they develop problems with alcohol. It's very individual. And so I think with teenagers in the first phase of alcoholism, in the first stages, it's tough to know who's who. In the end stages, a little kid can tell you who's a late stage alcoholic most of the time. So I think we need to be judicious, and we need to introduce the topic, the discussion.
Can I pipe in?
One moment, please. I'm sorry, Sharon. Thank you. So I want to piggyback on that. Some people were asking about what if it's your spouse that won't admit that they have a problem, and how do you manage that? And then somebody also was asking about practical suggestions for Purim and Passover, for the Seudah and for the Seder. So let me
If I
just
may
take one
go
of our
back to the
participants.
first part. The question, if I saw someone with a gun in their hand, and I know if I would tell them, they'd be mad at me. If I would try to take it away, they'd be angry at me. I don't care. And I've had the experience where, well, first of all, I've had the experience when I've approached someone, they didn't listen to me, but they knew I loved them. And that's the beginning what Lou talked about, and the idea of I was making the connection. Worst comes to worst, they're not going to listen to me. They may even hate me, but they're going to know someone cared enough and loved enough to take that risk. So it's worst comes to worst, they won't listen to you. Okay. And secondly, in 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12th step is to share with someone, to take the message out, and that changes me. Whether you listen to me or not is irrelevant. I need, as a human being, whether alcoholic or not, I need to be able to risk because I love, risk because I care about someone else. So if question is, do we really believe that alcoholism is life-threatening? If I really believe it, I don't give a darn if you're going to like me or not when this is over, and you're going to know that if I can give the message. In terms of, there are all kinds of ways. Judaism does not demand drunkenness. Judaism does not demand that we drink alcohol. It doesn't. And please speak with people who, there are all kinds of ways to fit Yiddishkeit, fit Judaism into our lives that are going to be healthy and loving and caring and spiritual. Ask the questions, and there are all kinds of ways. And if someone tells you you can't, keep asking the question. There was a third part of it. I don't remember. Thank you.
Practical suggestions for the Seder, for the Suda and the Seder.
Well, and grape juice is 100% usable. Now it's interesting for Friday night, not Pesach, when people get out. It's interesting that even in halachic terms, the Friday night kiddush can be said on hamotzi. And I knew people who, for reasons, grape juice was too difficult. They'd make kiddush, Friday night kiddush on hamotzi. It doesn't work for Pesach, I know. But that's, I mean, there's grape juice, and I say for Shabbos, there's even just using challah, not grape juice.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
I just want to say, Lou, before you jump in, I just want to say, I know there are over 100 people in this room, in this group. If you have a personal thought, perspective, you want to share it in the chat, that's fine. You can chat to everyone. Everybody has the power to do that. We're going to limit comments to our panelists only in the interest of time. And in terms of time, our panelists are willing to stay here as long as there are people who are willing to ask questions and have questions to be asked. If you do not get a question answered, I just put our email address in the chat. Please feel free to email us if you want to direct it to one of the panelists. We will share their emails, or you can go through us and we will share it with them, and we will get you answers to all your questions. But again, comments should be the panelists only. We appreciate everybody's perspective on this, and we just want to keep this moving. Thank you so much.
And if you have
Lou,
your
go ahead, Lou.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Lou.
I was going to comment on the two questions. One about what you do if your spouse has a problem, and what you just asked about things that can happen, suggestions for Purim, suggestions for Simchas Torah, for suggestions for any Jewish event or non-Jewish event. And I think it needs to be prefaced by there's no guarantee. What we do does not create a guarantee that we're going to prevent somebody from having alcoholism. However, I think we need to do the hishtadlus. We need to do the right behaviors, regardless of the fact that it's not going to be 100% perfectly preventative. With that said, can you imagine the difference for a 14-year-old youngster who has a Rebbe who says, let's drink, it's Purim, we can drink now, we listen to the Megillah, it's time to drink, versus a 14-year-old whose Rebbe says, let's have fun now, let's do something that is fun without alcohol. And that becomes an experience that can be reinforced, that can be added to. Does that prevent that 14-year-old from becoming alcoholic? Absolutely not. But it's a different experience than the inculcation and the immediate reinforcement. Purim is for drinking. We listen to the Megillah, but it's almost an afterthought. For people who want to drink, the Megillah and the celebration of holidays and the remembrance of what happened on the holiday, which Purim and Pesach and so many of our holidays have to do with gifts we've had and the incredible changes that happened because of Pesach, because of leaving Mitzrayim, because of Esther and Mordechai coming to the aid and the rescue of the Jewish people. You can't be in touch with that if you're drunk. It kind of wipes out the experience in a cognitive kind of way. And so I think there are a lot of things we could do. As far as spouses go, it is my experience often that family members, whether they be wives or adult children or parents, family members need to get well often before their loved one, their identified patient, their alcoholic or their drug addict or whatever the substance is or the process is. Family members often need to get well before anything's going to happen for the alcoholic. This is not an across-the-board experience, but it's more often than you would think. And so with a spouse who's alcoholic, that spouse, whether it's a wife or a husband, there's help that you can get. There's professional help, there's 12-step help, there's incredible effective reaching out to shift what's going on in the family, because the family in a dysfunctional way, when there's an alcoholic, is balanced. You need to actually shift the balance so that family members start to learn the truth and start to find what they can do, what they can control, and basically what they can't control.
Rochelle, there's questions come in that I want to see if our panelists can address. And the question is, how do you handle educating kids who range in age in a family from adult children to high school children and even younger, when the kids have all seen negative effects of alcoholism in a parent, but yet the adult kids will on occasion drink, especially at Purim and Pesach? How do you send the right message, I guess, to the adult children to not be influencing, the high school children? Again, this is a family where they've seen the negative effects of alcoholism. Any of our panelists want to jump in there?
I just would start the conversation, and it's a huge question, and I don't think there is a pat answer. But in education, obviously, we educate different people differently, and we have to keep in mind that, as Chaya said before, the whole world can eat strawberries and it's fine. If I'm allergic, I can't. So if we demonize alcohol to everyone across the board, it's not going to work, because that's not what they see. So the adult child, perhaps, who has the maturity to understand that they're also role models, so that that's one approach. The adult, you may be able to drink. I don't know if you're an alcoholic. That's something one should be careful of. If you know genetically there's some genetic reasons to think, that's something we're thinking about. But that's a conversation not only about you, the idea of you drinking, but what role are you going to be playing in someone else's drinking? I know that's when for the teenager, for the kid, they're different. They're indestructible. Different conversation. That what goes on in this house, things to be aware of. But it's a different conversation. And I'm not answering the question, but we have to break it down and educate the right child that's going to be correct for that child. And I can't be more specific than that. But you really have to fine tune it.
Can I jump in for 30 seconds on this? I think there's a kind of an issue that's going on here that we're not fully aware of, that in the fact that we're coming to deal with a problem that already exists. Dealing with a problem that already exists is always a challenge, no matter which way we go with it. Having to get into a conversation after something has already started and try to dig out of a hole that you're already in is going to be a challenge. Nobody's perfect here, and none of us are going to get this perfect here. And the other problem when it comes to alcoholism is that it encompasses and embraces so many other facets of our lives that we're not really quite sure if the symptom is the problem or the problem is the symptom, and what's going on over here. We know that in Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about that alcohol was but a symptom. But then you have people who are thieves, and you have somebody mentioned in the chat something about pedophilia and Purim, and when it comes to this stuff and what's going on, what we're showing our kids has to start at an earlier age than after the fact. Lou mentioned it before. Hindsight is 20/20 when it comes to this stuff, particularly when it comes to, most alcoholics in recovery. They'll turn around and in my experience, oh wow, I did that. Now I get it. So where do we go and how do we begin with this stuff is exactly what everybody is doing. We're beginning a conversation. The conversation will not be an easy conversation. There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of defiance. There's a lot of rebelliousness that's behind this stuff. But we need to have the patience and the fortitude and the persistence to continue this conversation. And whoever mentioned it in the chat before, if our seeds, if what we're saying, we can plant the seed in one person, then we've done something here that we couldn't have accomplished before by not having this conversation.
Thank you, Arnie. That was terrific. Okay, I'm going to call on someone. Second. Chaya Sarah Stark, I think maybe is your name. Are you there?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Did-
Can you
had
hear
your
me?
hand? Yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So
Remember to
it
be
was
a
a
question.
comment.
A question,
Right.
please.
So
Okay,
it
thank
was
you.
a comment. So I put it in the chat already.
Oh,
So
okay,
feel free
great.
to call on someone else.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Rabbi Chin, are you waving or do you want to speak?
just saying hello, hi, Sarah.
Okay.
I think
Hi,
that
Rabbi.
I think that Sharon had her hand up before.
Yes, I'm going through. Thank you.
Thank you.
It keeps moving around, so it's hard to find those people. Sharon,
Mine is also,
in the
can I please, it's a quick something. I just feel like
go ahead. Go ahead.
it's so emphatically important for the family members, friends, those who love alcoholics to be involved, not only indicated with therapy, but that associated with Al-Anon. The Al-Anon program teaches tools that we don't learn from therapy. We get the strength, the chizuk, what's needed from others that are in our exact position. I
Thank
just want to not only, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Sharon, thank you so much. I agree. I mean, familial support, whether it's a 12-step program or other support that's available to families is critical. We at CCSA host a support group for family members and that sadly is very well attended, is on Zoom and available to everyone. But absolutely, family members taking care of themselves, caring for themselves, and understanding everything that they can about the disease that's afflicting their loved one is a critical first step to being able to help your loved one or be there for your loved one.
And afflicting the person themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
A loved one.
Yes. So thank you for that. All right, Rochelle, wait, I see. Go ahead, Lou. You had a hand up.
I wanted to just co-sign what Jerome said and what you said, Etiel, just now. Al-Anon, I would add Naranon, because Naranon is a tremendous program as well. And I'm going to add another 12-step program that in the last bunch of years I have come to know for a lot of people has been very powerful, and that is Families Anonymous. Families Anonymous for parents of teenagers and young adults. It's not across the board, but there's nothing that's across the board. There are some very, very strong recovering people. And the thing to remember about Al-Anon and Naranon and Families Anonymous and the like is that they don't end. Therapy, if it's good, ends. It may start again sometime. It can come and go, but 12-step programs don't end. And they deal with not just stopping something. 12-step programs are about growth. They're about growing and moving to a different level of mindfulness and meaning in life, and can't say enough about them. And that's from somebody who's coming up on his 39th anniversary at Alcoholics Anonymous.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to call on another hand that's been up for a while. Alex Kushner.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to have the
Ask
podium.
your question. Yeah. Ask a question. Thank you.
I don't have a question. I just have an outlet for people in recovery with Recovery at the Crossroads. Many of you familiar with our organization. We are here to support, especially people with have the Jewish track and the kosher component. We are here to support you. So again, this topic is not usually a discussion in a public forum. I'm happy that this is brought up today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Alan Papier.
Hi. Good morning. My question is, many times a family tries to control the alcohol component for their various aged kids, but there's a larger family. Sometimes we go to aunts and uncles or grandparents for Passover, and those greater relatives don't always share the viewpoint that there's a problem. And both the alcohol or wine flows, or they take the point that kids need to experiment and get through it, and then, eventually it's not a problem. How do you deal with that greater family component? Do you not go? Because I find that it's impossible to control that.
Who would like to take that?
Go ahead, Lou.
do you not go to the, finish it again, repeat, do not go to,
Tell me again.
I think he meant go to the grandparents or the
Yeah,
other
Alan,
relatives who might
Go
not.
ahead, Alan. Did that work?
You're muted, Alan.
Yeah, he's
No, I
trying to.
think he was saying, do you not go to the grandparents or other relatives who might not share the perspective that that consumption needs to be controlled?
Yes, exactly. Do you just say thank you, but we're not coming?
I think it's a question that requires a little bit more individual situational discussion, but the bottom line, if you want me to be general, is you don't go if it's going to jeopardize something that really cannot be jeopardized. That, you know, a lot of what we're talking here are priorities. What's most important? And sometimes it's very easy to see what's most important, and sometimes there's gray. It's not black or white. But just in terms of recovery, if your recovery will be jeopardized, it's not a question that you don't go. But you need support. A person who's making that decision needs and can do that without doing it unilaterally on his own or on her own. There's also, you're hearing about all the different support groups and support avenues for you to not make these decisions alone, including parents that have youngsters that are coming of the age of drinking. You don't need to make this decision alone.
I heard something, if I could jump in for a second here. I heard, Alan, I heard something different than what Lou just answered. And my experience in dealing with people in recovery is that you cannot control if somebody's going to drink or they're not going to drink. It's end of story. If somebody has crossed that line, they're in the stage of alcoholism, and that craving is developed, or that allergy is there, and the phenomena of craving is there, and the obsession of mind is there. If they want to drink, they're going to find a drink. As far as Al-Anon goes, their suggestion is you got to live your life, and you got to learn how to enjoy your life, regardless of what's happening, with the other person. That doesn't mean that you can't care for them and be a little protective, but you're not going to be able to control what they do.
No, of course you can't control what they do. The question is, do you even go out of town to that relative? Because you know that they're going to just put the alcohol out and let whoever wants it.
So why not have the conversation? Why not have the conversation with those people?
I was going to second what Arnie just said, is that I've had to set boundaries with people and let them know. And if they don't respect those boundaries, then I make the decision not to put myself in those situations. But often people who love and care for me will respect it. And if they don't, sometimes we don't understand it. Another thing is that sometimes someone who has a drinking problem will want me to drink so they don't have to look at their own drinking problem. And so that's, and then I understand that that it has to do with them and it doesn't have to do with me. And I can have a little compassion for them, but I also get to be a sober example to them of how I stay sober. And so what happens is they often come back to me when they start to look at their problem and say, hey, how'd you do that? Because now, like 5 years later, they're struggling with it and they say, and so I try to keep that relationship open, but I also have to take care of myself. So the first thing I always do is let them know, hey, I'm not drinking, and please, and that also comes up with alcohol. I personally do not eat any food with alcohol in it. So with someone who doesn't know, I say I'm allergic to alcohol. And then, some people I might say, hey, I'm an alcoholic and I don't eat foods with alcohol in it. And either people say, oh, no problem. Or they say, well, what if there's a little bit or it cooks out? And they'll start to kind of push it. And then I'm like, okay, either I can educate the person or I can just say, I'm just not going to eat in their house. So it's really choices I get to make, but I learned tools how to handle these situations as I go along. And that's really the important part of having a good, strong support around me, is the guidance that I get from others in how to navigate each individual relationship and situation. And that's really helpful.
So for us, the support is in our home. We're trying to support our kids, and we have a wide age range from 7 to 20, and some have a problem, some don't. But what I found is, there's a grandfather who I've told one of my kids has an issue, and I find him at a bar mitzvah pouring booze for my 19-year-old son to drink with him. I can't get it across to him. He doesn't get it. and my brother-in-law, you know, I had an instance where I hosted their 16-year-old, and I found some beer in the house, and I told them, and their reaction was, you know, that's what kids do. It's okay. He has a drink every once in a while. So that's their kid. I didn't say anymore, but that's the environment. Now, do I spend a week in Passover in those houses? I can't change those people.
Right. And it also sounds like you've spoken up and they didn't respect those boundaries, and you get to make those choices based off of that. Sometimes it actually helps. I know, like, for me, saying, hey, if, you know, this is something that I do in my family, and if that's something, or this is something, and if that can't be respected, like, then I can't come. So I kind of make an ultimatum, and it depends on the situation. And so they're very clear on what the boundary is, and that's their choice, what they do with it once they know. But that's, you know, dependent on who and what. Because sometimes people just kind of push back and fight and argue and say, well, you know, it's not their business to do that, but it's a choice that I get to make, and the boundary that I set with that.
I don't get the confrontation. I get the agreement, but the non-fulfillment.
Thank you. Alan, you can reach out to us if you want to follow it up more. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you very much. Sharon, I'm sorry if I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Cebulski, did you have a question that you wanted?
No, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. No, I
Okay.
already participated. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Any of our presenters, did you see any other questions in the chat that spoke to you, or do you have, oh, Leanne, go for it.
No, I'm saying 5 more minutes.
Okay. I was going to say, if they didn't have one, then what we're going to do is a summation, each of our presenters in the same order.
I could just,
Rabbi,
I could just jump this.
please.
One the thought that when preparing for this program, one of the thoughts about Purim is like why do we have this focus on alcohol, wine specifically, and I was trying to understand it, and I think that just traditionally wine is looked at something that the human being has changed. You know, a lot of other foods, wine and bread. We take something and we created something new. This is not the fruit that came out of the ground. It's not the grain. So in a sense, the idea of wine, the reason wine and bread are treated very differently than other foods, because in Hashem has given us the ability and responsibility to use the world, to change the world, be constructive. Now, it's a double-edged sword. You know, the good news is that we can be constructive. The bad news is that we can be destructive. But the idea was that wine is a different bracha, bread is a different bracha than its natural state, because God wants us to interact. And if I can go back to one of the earlier teachings by Dr. Tversky, said when God in the Bereshit says, "Let us make man," he quoted the Baal Shem Tov. He said God was talking to us, that God doesn't do it by himself. We have a role to play in who we become. We have a role to be. It's not just God. We have a role to becoming a mensch, becoming an Adam. We have a role in completing the world around us. We can elevate, but with that choice becomes the possibility to destroy. But I think that's the intent that was there, and it's for us when and appropriately to use that or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go around and everybody can have a sum up. Arnie, would you like to start?
Why do I always get to go first? I don't want to go first.
Alphabetical.
No, it's okay. I want to thank everybody for being here. When I started, you know, this is not an easy conversation. There's so many things that have been brought up, whether it's the rabbis, whether it's people in shul, whether it's families, whether it's, you know, what is it? Collateral damage that gets caused because of alcoholism or drug addiction. And as I mentioned, just the openness and the willingness to continue a conversation and to learn something new about it. There is no, again, there's no such thing as a thermometer for addiction, but some of the behaviors, as Lou mentioned, 2020 behaviors, we can see very clearly. Some of the stuff is in our education. Some of it is our kids learn from what they see. You could tell kids one thing, but they're going to act out on what they see you doing. And those are the things that maybe we got to take a look at in ourselves first before we can start directing them what to do. Because when we start with ourselves, then then things come across a little bit differently. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. It was an honor and a privilege to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rabbi Chin, do you have one more thing, or your?
If I could, first of all, the bravery of CSSA to do something. A lot of people, we hear about things and we say, oh, something should be done. It's really a problem, but actually do something. Give up your time. Time is a very important resource and to be able to do something, kol hakavod to you and to all of us who participate, to be willing to participate, to have the conversation, whether it means making us vulnerable or making us open to education. So important. And in closing, I will tell you that, thank God, my experience many years ago when I was a high school kid, I was in the environment, we didn't know about alcoholism. But what I did see is that my rebbeim did not encourage me. They let us, they let you to do whatever you wanted. But we saw examples of people who, when it came to Purim, their connection was to the thought and to the song and to the connectedness. So I was very fortunate that to have that as an aspiration. So as a kid, I drank in high school, but I knew that was not what Purim was about. That was an immaturity on my part. I got to see what mature, God-fearing people, what they did with Purim, and that was my experience. I'm very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chaya.
I thank you very much. This was wonderful being here with all of you. I do want to say that this conversation should continue, that this is something that every single participant on here, talk to your rabbis, talk to your children's teachers, talk to your children about addiction, about their friends, drinking, what's happening, make that an open doorway, like an open, so that your kids can come to you and talk about it and feel safe, that they could talk about their concerns around drinking or the sleepover party they had that someone brought alcohol to. Because when that becomes a closed door, then where else do they go? To their friends. And that's not a great resource often to get help and support. So, I think that these conversations should continue, and they're really important. And CCSA is a wonderful organization that I highly recommend tap into and have that happen in your kids' schools, etc. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Lou.
Yes. Am I muted or no?
You're on.
Good. I'm going to say what I said when I started off, and that was, it was an honor to be here. I've been to a lot of talks like this. This was truly one of the great talks. The colleagues that I was on the panel with, really, if you people only knew how special these folks are, unless you do know, really was a treat just to sit here. And I'm gonna say that we can go out now, and we're not gonna fix everything all at once. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but I think that we can really carry this message, and we can pass this on to a bunch of people in our lives. And really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And we will ask Leanne and ETL.
Sure. So first of all, I'm honored to have the panelists that I have on here. Thank you for agreeing to give your time and your hearts and your passion. You guys have an incredible message to share. And, we really appreciate everybody coming on. Again, if you didn't get your question answered, the contact information was posted in the chat. Please feel free to contact us. And just to reiterate, in terms of our mission, not just in terms of events like this, where we continue the conversation about important topics that affect the Jewish community in terms of mental health and addiction, but we are also going into schools. We are also talking to rabbis. We actually have a rabbinical class that we will be addressing next month about how to treat community members who might be struggling, their families who might need support. We do have the support group for loved ones of those struggling with substance misuse or addiction. And we are hopefully a resource to many Jewish communities across the country, many schools across the country, and we're here for you. So if you need anything from us, please do not hesitate to contact us. And thank you again, Arnie, Chaya, Lou, Rabbi Hirsch, and Rochelle. You did a great job, Rochelle.
Thank you. I have great support here. We hope that today's event was helpful to all of you. I know it was helpful to me as well. If you would like more information to find out about our upcoming events or to speak with any of our presenters, you can always go to our website, which is time2talkaddiction.org, time, the number 2, talkaddiction.org, and it is posted in the chat still there. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. We wish you all good health and a beautiful week. Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
There was 109 people online at one time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Thank you. Okay. We ask everyone, thank you. You can leave the meeting and have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Good.
Okay, we're
All right.
good. Lou dropped, I mean, not Lou, Arnie dropped off.
But
Oh,
And Chaya, actually.
yeah,
oh.
but that's okay.
Wait, maybe they'll come back. Let me see.
If you want to ask them, yeah. Rabbi Chin, Lou, amazing. You guys were
You
just
too.
incredible.
You too.
That was just my head is
I
spinning.
need, Lou, we need your permission to take at least part of the clip.
Of your intro, your
You reiterated everything that we talk about in terms of talking to parents, in terms of getting in and talking to rabbis, what we teach in the schools.
Yeah.
I want to take your clip
Whatever you need. It's
and share it.
my life is such an open book. It's
no, actually, our goal, what I really want to do is we're trying to get all the rabbis in Bergen County on Rosh Chodesh Adar, this coming Shabbos, to talk about this issue from the pulpit, or such as it is these days with COVID.
unbelievable.
And so I want to take some of what you said and send it to all of them and say, this is why it's critical. We actually have support. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah,
for a number of shuls.
Yeah, and Rabbi Hirsch, thank you for helping us with the talking points that we sent around.
Yeah, very helpful.
So
but my head is spinning. We'll gather all of the any questions. Chaya, amazing.
Yay!
Oh, that was awesome. We will gather all the
really
questions
was.
that came in that need a response and send them out to you guys. You're on mute still, Chaya.
It was amazing. I am so overwhelmed by what just happened. It was just incredible.
Sorry, I don't know who Amy is.
Yes, I'm going to
She's with
introduce you.
us.
Amy is with us. Amy is
Thank
my
you.
best friend.
There you go.
And she lives down the block.
I
Amy,
thought
I'm
I was
trying
your
to-
best friend.
You
Yeah.
are my best friend. I have a lot of best friends, and now you're all my best friends. Amy, I'm trying. Oh, good. You're on
Yeah,
mute.
I
what
tried to
happened.
unmute
Michelle.
myself, but I couldn't.
Yeah, I muted everybody in the middle because we were starting to get, but
The
then
camera's
then people could still unmute themselves, but then Chaya couldn't unmute herself,
That
which
was-
wasn't what I intended, so.
Anyway.
The questions were amazing. The comments that people were helping each other, and it was just fascinating.
So hopefully we captured all the chat. We tried to save it all. So hopefully we have a file with all the chat. We'll
would be
parse
good.
through it. Anything that didn't get answered, we'll send out to you guys. And that will get